If someone makes a public apology for previously speaking incorrectly, but in doing so they again misstate what actually happened, is the apology genuine, or is it a case of a new lie to explain an old one? Earlier this month, members of the General Synod gathered at the University of York. Take a look at what the Archbishop of York, Stephen Cottrell, said at the start of his presidential address. He made these comments on Friday the 5th of July this year, 2024.
And just before giving the address, Synod, I'd like to make a small correction to the record. Since the last meeting of the General Synod and following the publication of the Wilkinson report, it has come to my attention that when I spoke in the ISB debate at the July Synod in 2023, I mistakenly said that the decision by the Archbishop's Council to terminate the contracts of the two remaining members of the ISB was unanimous. Actually, the Wilkinson report states, of those voting, 11 voted in favour, 4 voted against, 4 chose not to vote. I'm sure we will all remember, those of us who are here, it was a heated and difficult session. I spoke incorrectly, and since it's been pointed out to me, I wanted to take this opportunity to apologise and to put the record straight.
He's right to say that the meeting in July 2023, where he made the error, was heated and difficult. But does that explain why he spoke incorrectly? Let's take a look at what he said in July 2023. In this next clip, he's answering a question from Synod member Robert Thompson from the Diocese of London.
I think I just again want to reiterate something I said earlier. The decision that was taken, painful though it was taken because we believe in the medium term it will be the best way of providing what the Church needs in terms of scrutinising and overseeing the safeguarding of the whole Church in its ministry to everyone. But this was a collective decision and it was a unanimous decision. As I think has come out, there may have been some disagreements around timings because this was a sensitive issue, but they were not disagreements about the decision itself.
It's easy to misspeak when you're speaking off the cuff in answer to a question you were not expecting. But the questions followed a scripted, prepared and rehearsed presentation by some members of the Archbishop's Council, including Stephen Cottrell. This is what he said in his introductory remarks, long before the session could be described as heated and difficult.
I'll make a few final comments at the end of this short presentation before we open up for questions. But the other thing I want to emphasise is that we do take collective responsibility for this as the Archbishop's Council. Yes, we wish we weren't here, but we have proceeded all along in the knowledge that we are working with people of goodwill and in the belief that we do all want the same thing, but we acknowledge that we have failed to get there. And the decisions that we took in getting here were unanimous.
Take a look again. When Stephen Cottrell says that the decision was unanimous, he was reading from his notes.
And the decisions that we took in getting here were unanimous.
The decision being talked about is the Archbishop's Council's decision to scrap its Independent Safeguarding Board, or ISB. This was created to provide independent scrutiny of the Church of England's continuing safeguarding fiasco. But the Archbishop's Council didn't really want a safeguarding board that was truly independent. And so, after continuing pushback by the two real independent members of the ISB against continuing interference by the Archbishop's Council, and fed up with criticism from the ISB over safeguarding failings, the Archbishop's Council decided to scrap the ISB and sack its members, giving them just an hour's notice before a public announcement. The Archbishop's Council even ignored advice given to them to ensure that those victims and survivors the ISB were working with were told ahead of a public announcement so that additional support could be put in place for them. And so the Sunday afternoon synod session, which Stephen Cottrell describes as heated and difficult, was hastily added to the synod agenda, replacing a session in which the ISB were to report to synod on what they had found so far. That's the background. Let's now go back into the detail. Questions about the disbanding of the ISB were first formally raised at the synod during question time on Friday, 7th of July 2023. Watch this question to Archbishop of Canterbury Justin Welby and note his willingness to answer the question and the Archbishop's Council's lawyer trying to stop him.
The response says that the decision was the Archbishop's Council and not the two Archbishops personally. As a statement of fact, how did the Presidents vote on this issue at Archbishop's Council?
Chair, I'm not sure. I'd like advice. I mean, I know the answer. Am I allowed to give an answer to that or not? Because it's obviously the voting was within the Archbishop's Council. I'm not sure if that's confidential or not. And I'm allowed, and whether I'm perfectly happy to give an answer, but I just don't know if I'm permitted to.
I'll just take advice.
Thank you.
The advice I've been given is for you to respond in writing after taking advice.
I respond in writing after taking advice, or you respond in writing after taking...
You respond in writing after taking advice.
And could you advise me as to who advises me? And do I publish the written response if that is the advice? I'm quite happy.
Yes.
I'm asking for the legal opinion.
Yes.
Thank you. So why can't I just tell people?
If you wish to, you may.
Both archbishops wished to wait a bit.
Why was the Archbishop's Council so determined to portray the decision as unanimous? That has not been explained. The claims began in a June 2023 paper from the Archbishop's Council Secretary-General, William Nye, to members of the General Synod. The paper, GS Misc 1341, was penned to provide background to the decision ahead of the heated and difficult session the following month. In it, he writes, "It is the considered judgment of the Council as a whole that it is necessary to reset the process in order to get to the destination." Since disbanding the ISB, the Archbishop's Council has spent more than £1 million of charitable funds to defend its actions, including commissioning 2 reports from lawyer Sarah Wilkinson into the creation, work and termination of the ISB, and by Professor Alexis Jay, the former chair of ICSA, that's the Statutory Independent Inquiry into Child Sex Abuse, which found appalling behaviour by the Church of England officialdom, into how an independent safeguarding structure for the Church of England should be established and how it should operate. Sarah Wilkinson's report sets out the vote in Archbishop's Council on the decision to disband the ISB. Rather than being unanimous, 11 members of the Council voted to scrap the ISB, 4 voted against, and another 4 abstained. So why the continuing insistence by the Archbishop's Council and its staff that the decision was unanimous? In his apology, Stephen Cottrell sought to explain his speaking incorrectly on the heated and difficult nature of the session in which he spoke.
I'm sure we will all remember, those of us who are here, it was a heated and difficult session. I spoke incorrectly.
This, however, does not stand the test of scrutiny. Firstly, he made the comments twice. A, in his pre-prepared and scripted opening comments, and B, in answer to a question. Second, it echoed the comments from William Nye that the decision was that of the Archbishop's Council as a whole. Thirdly, following Justin Welby's comments that both archbishops wanted to wait before a decision to disband the ISB, the Archbishop's Council's communication staff proactively briefed the media to say that the decision was unanimous. So if his explanation doesn't stand up to scrutiny, what about his apology? In setting out why he was correcting the record, he said that it had come to his attention that he had misspoken, quote, following the last meeting of the General Synod and following the publication of the Wilkinson report, close quote.
Since the last meeting of the General Synod and following the publication of the Wilkinson report, it has come to my attention that when I spoke in the ISB debate...
The Wilkinson report was published in December 2023. Since then, there was a meeting of the General Synod in February 2024. So why has it taken until now, a year later, for Stephen Cottrell to realise that he had misled the Synod? We may never know. But if the apology is sincere, and if he meant it, why is the only record of it confined to the Synod's yet-to-be-published record of proceedings? And why is it not included in the published text of Stephen Cottrell's presidential address on his own website? A video isn't as searchable as a web page. So by delivering an apology before the presidential address...
And just before giving the address, Synod, I'd like to make a small correction to the record.
And doing it in such a way as to minimise its digital footprint, there isn't much sincerity to it at all. Stephen Cottrell did not make the claim that the Archbishop's Council made a unanimous decision to disband the ISB in the heat of the moment during an off-the-cuff remark in answer to a question. He made it as part of a campaign of misinformation that sought to portray the decision as unanimous when it clearly wasn't. Why? Who knows? What difference does it make if the decision was unanimous or only partly supported? The decision was taken. But by choosing to lie, and continue to lie about it, the Archbishop's Council continue to play their game of showing disdain to victims and survivors and demonstrate very clearly that they have no regard for the truth. You could say they are liars. I certainly do. In preparing this report, I provided the Archbishop of York with a right to reply, and I asked 3 specific questions. I asked whether he'd been advised to say in July 2023 that the decision was unanimous. His spokesperson said that the words he used were entirely of his own choosing and that there was no intention to mislead. I asked whether he was part of the discussion and deliberations that led to the Saturday afternoon media briefing where journalists were falsely told that the decision was unanimous. No answer was forthcoming, and the communications team at Church House in Westminster said they had nothing further to add. I also asked whether Archbishop Stephen had been subject to a complaint under the clergy discipline measure for the false statement. In response, his spokesperson pointed to the unlawful sections of the Clergy Discipline Commission's Code of Practice, which seeks to pretend that there is a legal requirement for confidentiality on clergy discipline cases. If the Archbishop's Council is as concerned as Stephen Cottrell claims to be about misleading statements on the demise of the ISB, why won't they clarify the reasons behind their false media briefing? They could clear it all up. But, as we all know, the Archbishop's Council doesn't like to be honest when it comes to safeguarding.